What if I told you that Jim Jones, yes, the Jim Jones we all know, just acknowledged attacking Camron in court? Well, the truth is much deeper than that. Jim has been concealing something so explosive and repulsive that it could alter your perception of him and Camron. Actually, Jim just revealed Chrissy's darkest secret in court, and I can assure you that is something you have never heard of before. If you think you know these guys, think again. This is about betrayal, not just a fistfight. Jim finally took charge and put everything on the line. But why attack Camron now? What is the true reason for the violence? Is it retaliation or something worse? Stay tuned. You won't believe what you're about to hear because by the end, you won't look at Jim Camron or Chrissy the same way again. It's no secret that Jim Jones has always been in the spotlight for his notorious actions, but today we're diving into Jim Jones and Camron have been at odds for years. We all know about the Diplomats, the legendary duo that helped define a rap era, but it wasn't just about music. Behind the scenes, there's always drama, and this time it's not just about the money, the fame, or the clout. It's something much more personal. Jim Jones, a man who has never been afraid to speak his mind, has kept his secrets hidden for years, but in a shocking turn of events at the recent court trial, Jim finally spoke. To assault Camron, and he didn't stop there. Jim continued to divulge information that no one had anticipated. I promise you will want to know every detail of what transpired, but the real shocker is that it isn't just a story about two grown men fighting. It's about betrayal, love, and a sinister secret that could destroy everything Jim Jones has worked so hard to build. It involves Chrissy, Jim's longtime partner, and something so bizarre that it makes you reevaluate everything you knew. Jim and Camron were once brothers, business partners, friends, and allies who ran the Diplomats, a major force in the rap industry. However, somewhere along the line, things started to change. There were rumors of betrayal and hidden agendas, and when you look into their past, you realize that their relationship was never as perfect as it seemed. People close to them claimed that they were constantly at odds, but nobody ever believed them. Truly understood why. So what exactly transpired in court that caused Jim Jones, a man who typically maintains his composure, to lose it and attack Camron? The truth is that the story begins with Chrissy Elkin, Jim's longtime partner. But it's not just about their love. It's about a covert affair that Chrissy had with someone Jim considered family and whom Jim trusted greatly. You guessed it, it was Camron. Yes, Jim was unaware of Chrissy and Camron's relationship. The entire Dipset family was shattered when the truth was eventually revealed. But why would Chrissy do this and betray Jim in such a vicious manner? Was it about money, power, or something deeper? We don't yet know, but we do know that this affair was the catalyst that started it all. If you think Jim Jones's attack on Camron in court was shocking, wait until you hear what Jim revealed during his testimony. The affair had been going on for months before Jim discovered that Chrissy and Camron had been skulking around. It was like a switch flipping inside Jim when he first learned about the affair. He went from being the cool, collected leader of the Diplomats to someone consumed by anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. Imagine discovering that your partner, the person you've built your life with, had been having an affair with someone you considered family. Jim had no idea that Chrissy had betrayed him in the worst way possible. Someone you believed had your back, but it gets even stranger. Jim didn't just sit back and accept the betrayal. He went after Camron, not just verbally, but physically. There was a heated argument and a fight that quickly turned into something much worse, and Jim was furious. It wasn't just that Camron was disrespecting him. Jim felt like he was losing everything. His relationship, his family, his crew, his entire world was falling apart before his eyes. However, when Jim finally took the stand in court, everything changed. For the first time ever, Jim talked about he revealed to the world how it felt to realize that Chrissy had been lying to him the entire time, and that Camron, the man he called his brother, had been sleeping with his girl behind his back. Just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, Jim dropped another bombshell. Camron wasn't the only person involved in this mess. There were others in Jim's inner circle who had been hiding the truth. The courtroom revelations were shocking for Jim Jones and Camron, but they also had the entire industry on edge. Everyone was talking about Jim's sudden attack in court, But why was he so angry? Betrayal hurts, of course, but was more than anyone could have imagined. Jim didn't just admit to attacking Camron, he went on to explain why he felt justified. In his testimony, Jim made it clear that this was about more than just an affair between his woman and his so-called brother. It was about power, money, and control. Camron wasn't just a friend. He was supposed to be Jim's business partner, someone he trusted with everything he had built. However, instead of being loyal, Camron cut deals behind Jim's back, made shady moves, and surrounded himself with people who were harmful to Jim's empire. Jim wasn't just upset about the affair. He was also upset about Camron's constant attempts to discredit him. Camron was supposed to be the diplomat's soul, but he was gradually becoming a liability. The real question was whether Camron had been planning this betrayal for years, trying to deposit and plan his own ascent while Jim was preoccupied with his life partner. It turns out that Jim believed that perhaps this affair wasn't just about sex, but rather that Camron was attempting to get rid of him. Keep in mind that isn't just a random argument over a girl. We're talking about decades of friendship, music, money, and loyalty being thrown out the window for a dirty secret. Jim was incensed at the betrayal of trust and realized that the man he had known as family was gradually working behind the scenes to steal what was his. What Jim said next in court was enough to leave anyone speechless. He accused Camron of attempting to ruin his career. You see, the Dipset empire wasn't just a bunch of friends making music together. It was a huge business. And Jim wasn't, as the CEO, he was aware that he needed to make the right decisions to keep things going smoothly. But when Camron began making deals without consulting Jim and moving behind his back, Jim realized he needed to take drastic measures to protect his reputation and the affair. That was the last straw. During the court hearing, Jim described how others in camp had been complicit in the betrayal, with people he believed to be loyal working covertly with Camron. These weren't just dubious people, they were trusted allies of Jim's. Now, let's talk about the public reaction. You can imagine the storm of controversy caused. The streets were on fire, and rumors of Dr. Jim Jones and Ark Cameron's betrayal became trending hashtags. Fans were split. Some sided with Jim, who claimed that loyalty is crucial in this business, while others sided with Camron, who said that Jim was exaggerating and that this was just a personal issue. Of proportion, but here's the thing. The public's outrage didn't stop there. It spread to the music industry itself, where other musicians began to take sides and draw battle lines. Wasn't just a rap feud anymore. It was a full-fledged war, and the effects were felt by everyone who had anything to do with Jim and Camron. Anonymous sources close to the matter started to leak information that escalated the drama. One source claimed that Camron had been secretly courting Chrissy for years before Jim and Chrissy were serious. According to one shocking report from a close insider, the affair began in the early 2000s, long before Jim even considered getting serious with Chrissy. If is accurate, Camron was playing a long game, waiting for the right opportunity to intervene and take Jim's life and career. The leaks didn't end there, though, as Camron allegedly persuaded Chrissy that Jim's influence was waning and that his days of controlling the Dipset were coming to an end. In this version of events, Chrissy was only a pawn in the game, manipulated by Camron's promises of power. The scandal didn't stop at betrayal. It also had financial repercussions, as fans began to choose between loyalty to Camron and Jim. And let's not forget about the business deals that were taking place behind closed doors. Empires were numbered. Camron's own rise in the industry allowed him to take over, leaving Jim in the dust. Jim was informed that this was the pinnacle of insider trading, but it wasn't just about Wall Street. It was about the music industry. The fallout wasn't limited to courtrooms and social media. Major investors in Dipset started to withdraw, uncertain about the brand's future. Jim Jones's empire was suddenly in jeopardy. The scandal turned from a private dispute between two men to a public business crisis. But hold on, doesn't only affect Jim's empire. Camron is also affected. Several reports surfaced following the court session, indicating that Camron's fans started criticizing him for his lack of loyalty to Jim, and some even conjectured that his career might not recover from this betrayal. His public image had taken a serious hit, and everyone who had ever worked with Camron or Jim was now stained by the blood of this rivalry. What's worse is that nobody knew who would win. The aftermath of Jim Jones's, the music industry and his personal life have been irrevocably impacted by this explosive courtroom admission. No one could have foreseen the extent of this scandal, but now we find ourselves on the precipice of a dramatic downfall that no one could have anticipated. The fallout from this betrayal has not only affected Jim and Camron's personal relationship, it has spread throughout the entertainment industry. Don't be fooled, though. It is just the beginning. Let's start with the legal ramifications. You knew it had to go there, right? The court wasn't the end of Jim's assault on Camron in front of a judge was just the start of this nightmare. It wasn't just a heated argument. It was assault. Although Jim did argue that he was experiencing emotional distress, the charges were still pending, and legal experts started to speculate as to whether it would result in a lawsuit or even criminal charges. Jim's career had always been one of perseverance, but the road ahead was looking rocky. His reputation had taken a huge hit, and his legal troubles were far from over. But Jim wasn't backing down as his team began preparing for. The streets started to hum with rumors about what might turn out to be a protracted legal battle. Some claimed that Jim was preparing to sue Camron for defamation, arguing that years of betrayal and false rumors had damaged his reputation. The question was not whether Jim would legally retaliate, but rather how much. Would turn into a full-scale conflict between the two former friends, or was there a chance for some sort of reconciliation? To be honest, nobody thought that once the betrayal was unveiled. However, Camron wasn't just sitting around doing nothing. Rather, he was subtly positioning himself in ways that could hurt Jim's career. Rumors started to circulate that Camron was already working on a diss track that would portray Jim as a villain in the story. The problem is that diss tracks aren't just for rap anymore. They're a full-fledged marketing strategy, and there's no better way to the narrative than through music. If Camron played his cards correctly, he could turn the entire scandal into the question on everyone's mind was whether the conflict between Jim and Camron would permanently destroy Dipset's legacy. It wasn't just a question of who would win or lose. It was also about what would be left in the wake of this destruction. Could the brand recover, or would this be the end of a golden era in hip-hop? While the media and fans debated the future of Dipset, the financial fallout was equally important, because Jim Jones wasn't just an artist, but also a businessman. His investments in a number of ventures, fashion and real estate, among other things, had made him a major player in the entertainment industry. However, with his personal life in ruins and his reputation damaged, would those businesses survive? Would his empire collapse along with his reputation? The ramifications were enormous. A number of high-profile brand partnerships that Jim had worked on for years suddenly found themselves in a difficult situation. Luxury brands that had previously sided with the Dipset rapper started reevaluating their deals. One unnamed source revealed that numerous large corporations were now closely examining their agreements with Jim because of his involvement in the scandal, which made him a liability. These companies were seriously considering whether it was still worth the risk to be associated with Jim. Jim's legacy was at stake, and many of his fans who had once looked up to him as the face of Dipset were now split. Some were quick to turn their backs on him, accusing him of being a fraud and a hypocrite, while others were willing to defend him, saying that what the most intriguing aspect of this entire situation was how the media covered it. You couldn't turn on your screen without seeing endless headlines about Jim's courtroom outburst, followed by memes and viral content tearing both men apart. These events were simply the result of years of pressure and the complex nature of fame, but regardless of how his fans responded, the fact remained that Jim was no longer the untouchable figure he once was. The myth of invincibility was shattered. Industry insiders, celebrities, and even former collaborators started taking sides. Some posted passive-aggressive messages on social media, while others more openly expressed their support for one or the other. They were curious about who would win this battle, and even though the story had only just broken, the media was already spinning it into an endless loop of sensationalism. Now it was evident that the scandal was encircling everyone. A particularly juicy tidbit was leaked by a former member of Dipset, who stated that tensions between Jim and Camron had been building for years. According to this source, it was only a matter of time until the whole thing exploded. Jim had been playing catch-up for far too long, while Camron had been planning ascent. This was a public spectacle that forced everyone to take a stand. Would the Camron strategy succeed, or would Jim regain his position at the top of the rap game? Backfire. The answers to these questions were unclear, but one thing was certain. Dipset would never be the same again. Now, the real repercussions started to happen. Fans turned against one another. Businesses began to distance themselves from the two rappers, and industry insiders started to wonder if either of them would survive this mess. The two men who had once stood side by side at the height of hip-hop were now separated by a tremendous chasm of mistrust and betrayal. This wasn't just a personal fallout, it was a crisis that affected the entire industry, with Jim Jones's and Camron's futures hanging in the balance. Who would emerge from the scandal's ashes? Would either of them find atonement, or was this the end of a once glorious era? As we watch the drama play out, one thing is clear: this is just the beginning.